keep seeing things popping up on social media, people needing advice, they're pulling their hair out, and I feel that my almost 50 years of being in the sector and over 30 years of running my nurseries might help other people. But I'd love to know in the chat or under the video on YouTube your views and what methods you use, what works for your setting. So let's begin with the biter. This is the problem that seems to raise its ugly head most times, and that's because it's such an ugly act, isn't it? The child is hurt, the parent's upset, the member of staff is feeling as though they've not done their job very well. Often there isn't a reason. It's difficult to put right. So let's start with the child. The child is always at the centre of my practice, and it is important that the adults understand and get things right. So we will come on to them, but let's begin with the child. Now, why do children bite? It could be that they missed the developmental stage when they were little. They were told to keep things out of their mouths. It could be that they can't yet communicate quick enough, and therefore they defend their toy, or they respond in a reptilian way and react perhaps being hurt. It may be that they bite out of affection. It may be that their parents have used nibbling, biting babies' fingers, nibbling them, and it's learnt behaviour which the child is unable to modify a nibble. And the nibble's quite refined in comparison to a bite. It may be there's something going on at home and the child has regressed. This is where parent partnerships are really important. And well, we'll just cover that one. Parent partnerships are so important here. If you've built up a good, trusting relationship with the parent of the biter and the child, particularly that has been bitten, then the whole situation is so much easier to manage and communicate with that parent effectively. Well, let's go back to the child. So first we really need to analyse what's going on. Obviously we need to try and prevent the biting, and that's really tough in a group situation. And I know often children are bitten and the child that's bitten doesn't cry, and if they do, maybe the actual act hasn't been witnessed, so the member of staff doesn't know why that child is crying, and maybe it's not reported to the parent. So, you know, it can be very difficult. Now, if it's a developmental stage, then really we need to give that child the opportunity to have those sensory experiences in a different format to biting a person. But as they're older, we can add the words that go with that. Sometimes children just need something to bite because they perhaps missed that opportunity, or diverting the biting onto something that is more acceptable is a good idea. For example, we had a little girl who was biting profusely. She was about 3. She did have language, but she just seemed to need to bite. So we gave her, it was a rubber toy that would normally squeak, and we gave her this, I think it was a train, to bite. So if we saw she was getting anxious or irritated in any way, then we would make sure that this object was close by and remind her that it was there. So we gave her permission really to bite in a more acceptable way, and she did grow out of it. She also took the toy home. Now, the child that doesn't have language, that gets frustrated, it's very normal. Not necessarily acceptable, but biting is very normal at between, I would say, 1 and 2 plus, where children become frustrated either because they want to express themselves or because there's conflict of some description. Now, with these children, they really need to be monitored closely. I'll come on to staff monitoring in a minute. But giving the child language, actually giving the child language right from your baby room, even if they can't use it, we need to give it to them so they're thinking it, because if they've got that language and are thinking it, that's helping them regulate their own behaviour. So for a baby that's playing rough and tumble with their friends, we can say, you need to be kind, we need to be gentle, we don't want to hurt whoever. We also can recognise what's preferable. That's nice giving so and so your toy. That's nice that you're sharing the paper or the paint. Okay. So we're giving the child the language that they will run internally. So where a child becomes frustrated or wants to use their language but doesn't have it, the educator really needs to monitor that child very closely and step in with the language that will support the language they've used in the past when the child is younger, when the child perhaps wasn't biting, but familiar language, such as Johnny's playing with that at the moment. Let Johnny finish playing with it, and then I'll make sure you have your turn. Or let's find another car that you can play with. Then Johnny's happy, and whoever their name is happy. So it's about the practitioner, the educator, stepping in, interpreting what's going on. And this is why it's really important that key persons know their children really well. Now, for older children, it's much easier to talk through perhaps how they feel without necessarily imposing what you feel they are feeling. We might have lots of words for feelings, but it doesn't mean that they're feeling angry. It doesn't mean they're feeling frustrated. You know, they might be feeling angry when they're feeling frustrated. So we can suggest feelings. We can empathise that they're not feeling very happy at the moment, so that we recognise that things are not right, and we can offer our help by saying, would you like me to help you? All the child has to do is nod if they're in the right frame of mind. I accept that. Now, handling the child has become more difficult, I think, because we want the child to be resilient. We want the child to monitor and correct their own behaviour without us imposing something upon them. I do think, though, that the consequence of the behaviour, without actually telling the child off, obviously if it's a 5-year-old, that would be appropriate to say this isn't acceptable, we don't do that. But with younger children, I think by showing them that poor Johnny has been hurt and giving Johnny lots of cuddles and sympathy because he has had a hurt, his hand hurts, his arm hurts, does send a powerful message to the child. I don't think the child should be scolded when they're very little, because it is normal. It's how we handle it that's important. I do think we can talk after the event how we are kind to our friends, how we don't bite, how we stroke, how we cuddle, how we kiss, but we don't scratch, we don't bite, we don't hit, we don't kick, because that hurts. And talk about how they might feel if they were kicked, or how you would feel, or how maybe a persona dog might feel if you want to bring persona dogs into your practice. They are really useful. Obviously, it will depend on how old the child is. Now, if the child is regressing, then we need to handle it in the normal, stage-appropriate way for that child. And hopefully, we understand, or we have an inkling that things are not right. And that, again, is where your parent partnerships come in, right? Because the more you can support the child with the problem, the biting will decrease. Let's talk about monitoring the biting child, supervising them, protecting the rest of the room. Now, this is really very stressful, and I suggest you get an egg timer and maybe have at least one member of staff in the team that doesn't do it. Okay, somebody who is out of the equation, who remains the kind person in the child's eyes. That could be appropriate for an older child. We don't want the children to think that nobody likes me, nobody loves me, right? And I'm a firm believer that the more time and effort that's put into it, the quicker it will be solved, the better it will be for everybody. And yes, it may be that other children are not getting the attention that perhaps they would normally get, but in the longer run, everybody gets better attention. So my advice would be that staff take it in turns to play alongside the child, so they can step in quickly, and that might be 20-minute stints, or as people begin to get tired, then to make a verbal changeover. I think also it's important to make sure that the child that is doing the biting, I mean, this actually is the same for scratching, kicking, hitting anything really, but just make sure they don't become a scapegoat, right? So play really needs to be played down by members of staff as far as the other children are concerned. Otherwise they're all going to go home and say, that's Johnny bit them, when their parent inquires about a mark. And we've had that often, and the child in question was not even in on that day. So you do need to monitor them closely. Toddlers have lots of toys that are similar or the same. They can't share. They haven't got that. They haven't got to that stage of their development yet. Make sure that there are lots of opportunities for the painting. There isn't just one sponge. It's highly unlikely that you're going to do that in a nursery situation as an educator, but make sure you have got lots of resources so they don't have to fight over the same few. Now, obviously with a bite, we would apply a cold compress and check the skin hasn't been broken. And it might be your policy to inform parents straight away. What I personally feel is that although the other children might tell the parent, or the child themselves might tell the parent, it's in our nurseries we didn't tell parents who did the biting because we had already handled it. The situation may have happened in the morning and the parent was collecting their child at 6 o'clock. We didn't want parents to have a bun fight in the car park. And also it's about stigmatising that biter, making that biter a scapegoat. So we felt that was not appropriate. Now, saying all that, handling the parent is a skillful thing. First of all, make sure you get to them before their child. Okay? The last thing you want is Johnny to meet their parent at the door and tell them that they've got a hurt arm. Although if it's happened in the morning, the child's likely to have forgotten about it. Unless, of course, it really winds their parent up. and they're a bit older, and they've clocked that. So get to the parent first. Make sure you're clear that their child had an accident today. They hurt their arm. Unfortunately, they were bitten by another child. If you can give the reasons why, so the parent understands, and you can also say how you gave the child a lot of TLC, first aid, etc., and that you are handling the other child's behaviour, just as if their child was biting, and they may have done in the past, and they may do in the future, you would be handling them in a sensitive way too. Make sure you fill out your accident record, and make sure the parent signs it before they go home. Okay. Now, we had a handout to help parents understand biting, and make sure actually that we gave these to the parents before incidents happened. So, for example, when the children moved from the baby room into the toddler room, then we would give the handout as part of the transition. Now, I probably left some bits out, so I might add some things in the comments. It's very difficult doing these things, and I can't do things off. Well, I certainly could do it in the car, but I find it very difficult to write a spiel to read on video. It's just not my style. So good luck, and I hope you'll join in and give me your thoughts in the film below, in the comments below the film.